everybody, as per usual. I'm so British, I just apologize at the beginning of something. I mean, I'm not that British, I'm only mostly British, but anyway, I feel like if I said, occasionally my mother's heritage makes me just launch a live with an apology. Which is to say, I'm a little discombobulated, as per usual, because as per usual, I went to start this and it wasn't the same as it has been. Life is really hard for those of us who come from an age where we like our technology to be very basic and old-fashioned and just always work exactly the same way. All of which is to say hello and welcome. This is the launch special for Book 2 in the Tinkered Starsong series, which is this book. Dun dun dun, very exciting. There she is. Hi, Charity, sweetie. Oh my God. Hello, everybody. Oh, everyone's tuning in. Yay. As ever, if you would like to leave a comment saying hello and where you're tuning in from, I love it. It makes me feel very happy. It makes me feel like I'm actually talking to people. And also, I really love the idea that one of the few wonderful things about the internet is that we can talk to and relate to and communicate with people all around the globe. So I know there are some of you that got up early or stayed up late in order to watch this, and it just makes me feel really happy. So wherever you are, very much welcome to the regular monthly live, I guess, with yours truly. Ty, you're so funny. Ty is tuning in from a steampunk event to this, because that makes sense. Logic. Hello, everyone. Oh, such a pleasure to see you all. So, we're going to be talking about Book 2 in the Tinkered Starsong series. I do know, because I'm one of those readers, that there are people who are waiting until all 3 books are out before they read the series, so we will try to make this a spoiler-free discussion. If people ask a spoiler question, I'll just say that it's a spoiler and maybe answer it later in a comment, or, you can always drop me a calling card if you're dying to know, or you can reply to the latest cheer up, and I always will read that, and then I can reply in a way that doesn't spoil it for anybody. So this is book 1. This is book 2. We're essentially talking about book 2, but I gotta say, is it not the coolest cover art? I love the cover art. Obviously, it's book 2 because I am wearing a purple dress to go with the purple cover, because I don't know. I have to. One of the first things I thought I'd talk a little bit about, because I have them all here, is the cover art really quickly for this one. So, right. So there's actually 2 print editions of this book. There's this one, which, they're exactly the same. Internally, the guts is basically the same. The front cover is exactly the same. The only difference in the 2 print editions is in the spine. So, and in the label-y thingamajiggers on the back cover. So this version of it, which I'm holding in my hand, which has a purple spine, it's a wrap. So the colors from the front wrapped around the spine to the back. And then it has this weird looking barcode with like all these. This one is the Amazon printed version. So this was done in an Amazon printing factory. To confuse matters, they often use the same printing presses and same print locations, but technically this version is the Amazon one. And then the Ingram one looks like this. It has a black spine, so the purple doesn't wrap around, and it has a clearer back cover because they put the regular old barcode here sideways. Now, Ingram kind of chose to do that on their own, presumably so that the figures and the image at the bottom of the back could be better seen, which I kind of appreciate from Ingram, I've got to say, because it's me and I'm very involved in these covers, everything about the cover is kind of a hint as to what's going on inside. So the fact that this has like 3 different globes, the archway, the number of figures, the way the figures in the first book you're much further away from them. In the second book, we're a lot closer in on them, but there's 6 on the stage and also 6 in the sky. And then on the back, you see there's only 2 on the stage. On the back of the first one, the stage is empty, or the dais. So these are all things with me playing around, and I'm not going to explain what's going on any further because that would in fact be spoilers, but yeah, everything about the covers kind of has hints as to what's going on and what's different from book to book. And so I'm working on, so don't worry. I'm working on the cover for the third book at the moment, and my beta readers are going to get the internal text for the last kind of check. And yeah, so that's where we are with the progress of the series. Second one's out. Third one's almost ready. It's up for pre-order. It will be absolutely dropping on time. Don't worry. Yeah, so bucketing along. This is what happens when Gail writes 3 books in a row, right? I am drinking the purple tea. Should we talk about the tea? So, if you only come for the lives, or you don't follow me on social media or get the cheer up or anything like that, what's wrong with you? But there's been a tea in the works. So I decided that what the world really needed was an oolong, a blue or purple, because it could be both if you use butterfly pea leaf oolong. There's a lot of butterfly pea flower out there being used to make blue and purple tea, but it's usually decaffeinated, and it's usually offered as like the child's option at tea times and, you know, fairy tea and stuff. I wanted to create a caffeinated version of it, so I decided to try mixing it with oolong, because I thought oolong and what little flavor there is to butterfly pea would marry well together. I thought the color would be less interfering if you use a greenier, a yellowier oolong rather than one of the rubies or something. And I've been working with a wonderful little tea company that I met years ago on the steampunk circuit called Tea Punk Teas. And they and I are making a tea together, and it's just for fun. I'm not, like, it's not official merchandise or anything. I'm not getting cut or anything like that. I had so much fun creating this tea for myself, and then I was talking about it with you, and then you would say, well, how do we make it? And then I'd have to give you like 12 different links to get the tea over here and the butterfly pea over there and the right teapot over here. It just was getting too complicated. So so they're at the label stage of the tea. So we figured out the formula. They're ready to start boxing it up. We're getting the labels for the containers together. So all fingers crossed, we hopefully we'll be ready to go in the next chirp. If not, it will definitely be in the last chirp, which is also the last chirp. The last book launch, which is the October chirp. So if not September, then definitely by October we will have this tea. Meanwhile, this is what the tea looks like so I made it the regular way, and then I added a tiny bit of acid element. It's such a beautiful purple. I basically was trying to get the tea to match the book cover with like little droplets of acid. I made it a little strong. That's my want. I like really strong tea. What can I say? But here it is. I tell you, I am sitting facing the window, so I look at this tea with the light behind it, and it is gorgeous. It's really beautiful. It's wild. It's crazy. This has a little, I used blueberry acid because tradition, right? So I put a little tiny bit of blueberry syrup in it to get it to go purple. That's the thing about butterfly pea, is it in the presence of acid, it goes purple. So anyway, that's what I'm drinking today. So I'm gonna pour myself a little bit, and I could show you, I am drinking it out of this little purple teacup, one of my little Demigod teacups. Because it's an oolong, I figured I could have it in a smaller container, because that's tradition. And it just bumped up. So I hadn't really planned much for today, because I mean, things are still kind of chaotic with Amazon. It looks like we won the affiliate battle, such as it is. In other words, they stopped threatening to shut down my account. So go us. Thank you all for your help with that. And so far I've done another launch, which probably should have gotten them angry again, and they did not get angry again. So yay, go us. Amazon. So yes, no news is definitely good news where Amazon is concerned. But they're doing some other very strange things with their categories and overhauls and, you know, generally, and AI and all sorts of madness is going on over there. So, so it's still weird from a author dealing with them perspective, but yes, but it not traumatizing like it was for a while there. What else? Yeah, otherwise it seems pretty quiet. I mean, the dog days of summer, it's hot, and people seem to be on vacation or getting ready to go back to school, that sort of a thing. So, yeah, it's been sort of... Yes, Katie says, yay for not being mean, and I couldn't agree more. Yes, so it's just being sort of quiet. So I figured we'll just have our usual little gossip sesh. You can ask me about the new book if you'd like, the Tinker Starsong series in general, the sci-fi stuff in general, or anything else. I'm happy to answer any questions as per usual. I mean, theoretically, we should stick to this universe, but I don't think, honestly, when I upload these videos later, I don't think anybody really cares that much. So, it's up to you. As per usual, if you have a question, please put a question mark at the front. That way I know that it's a question when I'm scanning through. And I'm going to take another sip of my tea while y'all decide, come up with questions, perhaps. Somebody says my necklace is cool. So this, I got this, I want to say, London Worldcon, which was what? 2017? Something like that. Anyway, I got it at a London Worldcon from a Etsy shop called Hibernica, who I think are still around. And they do them in sort of different color palette ranges. There's also like a fire dragon red, yellow, orange version. It has matching earrings. And I love it because it's kind of like Dragon's Eye, but it's also a little sci-fi or space. And it goes, because it has this sort of range, it goes with a lot of different dresses. And I just, all of which is to say, I got it on a whim and I find myself wearing it all the time. And of course it goes perfectly with this dress. So I was like, well, I have to wear my space eyeball necklace, which is what I call it, because that makes sense. It's so me. But yeah, it lies really well and it's kind of a nice shape without being too hot, which, you know, the bigger necklaces are often very warm. But yeah, it has a, it's just funny because I think this ties into the domes in the Tinker Starsong. I'm mildly obsessed with spherical things, which means I gotta show you something. Hold on. Watch Gail like interrupt her live because I have to share a new acquisition with you. Mild might be the wrong modifier. I'm just obsessed with spherical things, okay? I got this pillow. I know, but it's so round and fuzzy, and I love it so much. It's just a spherical fuzzy pillow. I found it at TJ Maxx, and I was like, you, pillow, are coming home with me, and I just sit around hugging it. That's like, it's so fluffy. It's so fluffy. Yes, that's me cackling over my spherical pillow. I have this one as well, which is a, like, it's ridiculous. I just love spherical things. I love, like, the traditional old style Asian lanterns that were the only ones you could get in the 80s from, like, Chinatown, the, like, perfectly spherical white ones. Yeah, I like spherical things. I always wanted a round bed, but, you know, that seems hugely impractical and also difficult to get the sheets to fit properly. So no round bed for me. But I do like round things. Except plates. I like square plates. Don't ask me why. Silly pillows. Silly pillows are a thing. I decided if I were going to be so awful of a human being that I would embrace throw pillows in my life, that I would prefer really ridiculous silly throw pillows. So, it looks like we're just getting comments and not questions yet, so I'm having more purple tea. In case you're worried about it, or sad that it doesn't happen, it does not change the color of your tongue like purple candy does or anything like that. I always used to love that when I would eat grape candy, that my tongue would change colors. But butterfly pea leaf doesn't seem to do that. it doesn't seem to affect your internals either. So there it is. It's just a beautiful blue or a beautiful purple tea. No side effects. All right, I'm going to scroll and see if we have questions. Oh, I have a question. Tashira, is that Tashira? I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Yours is a name I've not seen before. This is the first time coming to a live. Oh, wow, I'm super honored. So I may have answered before. Don't worry about it. Everybody is used to me answering the same questions, and sometimes I answer them differently because I'm a whimsical person. But will there be any stories about Mora? Cragrat. Sure. Let's talk Cragrat. It's here. Here's Cragrat. So I have the title and the outline for the second one in this series. It is a planned duology, so there would just be the two. I am aware that it sets it up so it feels like there should be a second one, and yes. And there is some allusion in this book as to what is going on in after this book. So you do get a little bit of hint, just a little bit, just a touch. But that's because I have the outline, so I know what's going on. So yeah, I would like to write it. The thing for me from a writer perspective about this book in particular is Mora has a really strong voice. She has a cadence and a dialect. And I have to sort of climb back into that as a writer. So I have to reread the book and I would have to anyway to make sure I'm in the right headspace and then climb back in and just write the darn thing. And I just frankly haven't really felt like doing that. So I need to be in the mood. It is on the docket though. I really do want to write. I really want to write the second one for this one. That's on the docket. The fourth one in the San Andreas series is definitely on the docket. That's actually what I'm writing next. Or finishing next. It's half written. And then I'd also like to do a second Claw and Courtship book. So those are kind of where I am in terms of what I'm writing next. But one of the reasons I started to pursue independent publishing is so that I could be a little bit more whimsical and kind of write the things that moved me the most. And for a while there during lockdown, I was really struggling to write at all. And apparently it was the sci-fi that really inspired me. So that's where the Tinkered Starsong books came from. But don't worry, I will be definitely, I promise, unless I get run over, I will write the second one for the Cragrat series. So there will be more Mora. Don't worry about it. I'm glad you like her. Christina asks, is the squishy seating in the book really just a large version of your new pillow? Oh my god. The puffs, the couch puffs. I just love, it's not beanbag chairs per se. I've always loved a poof. I'm sorry, that's what my British side of the family calls them. I understand that's probably not the correct word in America. But like a sort of stuffed hassock, round spherical hassock thing, it shows up a lot cross-culturally and throughout history. And I like a big version of that. And I've always loved the idea of a kind of couch bed situation where you can kind of just cast yourself into it. Just sort of fall into the fluffiness like it's a cloud or something. So that's where the furniture, the dicey furniture kind of came from, this idea. I was always thinking about this idea that, the skin and their skin interactions and the sensitivity of their skins is very kind of part and parcel of their DNA as a species. And so I think they would gravitate towards sort of soft things and soft furnishings and gentle things, especially as they don't often wear clothing in their native home planet and home environment. So that also came into it when I invented the furnishings for the spaceship and everything. There's also a part of me that's like you get thinking about a spaceship and weight and transport and all that sort of thing, something you could blow up, something that's inflatable as furniture seems, or could conceivably be inflated as furniture in some way, seems quite logical for a spaceship to me. And I was also thinking of the way others write sci-fi, and there's something always kind of hard and plastic, or metallic, grungy and metallic, or hard and plastic, depending on which kind of sci-fi, whether you're in the white-blue world of sci-fi, or whether you're in the Firefly, you know, kind of grungy, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, so there's sort of these two kinds of sci-fi, and both of them have kind of harsh furniture on their spaceships. Sort of either kind of brutalistic, cut, metallic, salvage kind of furniture, industrial sort of furniture, or this sort of, you know, computer-generated plastic whites and grays sort of furniture. And I wanted to write a sci-fi where the interiors of the spaceships were explicitly not that. If you've read Croyd Rat, you'll notice I did that also all the way back then when I first wrote that book, which was over 10 years ago. I would think about like the stresses of space and the feel of space, both from a psychological standpoint, traveling through it in a little confined area. I think you would want something kind of soft and comforting. But also the stresses of space and the confinements of space in terms of the pressure of the vacuum outside and all of those sorts of things, and how that might inform the shape of the exterior of spaceships and stuff. So, you know, I think it's my archaeologist side of me. I'm always interested in how the environment informs and evolves the objects we interface with and the, you know, transport that carries us around, but also how the, what's the word I'm looking for? How the culture of the people who created the thing is going to inform how it appears and how you interact with it. So yeah, so that is why the furnishings are the way they are. It's all dicey related in the end. Dicey in space. Sally asked if I'll include music in the audiobook productions. I actually have a wonderful musician I've worked with before, but he only works with one of my producers, not with the producer who's going to be handling these books, so no, I won't, because I feel like it'd have to be so good, and I'm not good at it. I'm not good enough, music-wise. And I, how do I put this? It's one of those things where, like, I want the music to sound to you as you read about it or listen to the story, like your favorite music. And I don't know what that is. So for me to kind of force it on you is like me forcing you my kind of music, which I'm very well aware music's very subjective, and you know, the kind of music that informed me when I was writing these books, which I'm talking about on the blog quite a bit, might not actually appeal to you. It's very pop, it's very manufactured, which I really like. Again, I think archaeology, culture, what humans produce and how humans interface with culture is what is interesting to me. So I'm not like a harsh music critic in terms of sort of originality or anything like that. So yes, so which is a very long way of saying that what I want you to get out of these books is the idea of the immersive concert and music and the sort of worshipful, transportive, almost religious nature of that experience as a part of the human experience. And if you get that from prayer, or if you get that from a concert, or if you get that from a sporting event, that's the sensation I want to engender, or the memory that I want to encourage and be associated with the experience of the dome in particular. And that's kind of contingent on what music moves you the most, not necessarily what moves me. And so if I put music into the audiobook, it would be only what moves me. And it might, for lack of a better word, alienate some of you listening to it. That said, if you have read this new book, you have met our new character. You have been introduced to Quasilan. And they speak in a very strange voice, which is a bit of a spoiler, so I'm not going to talk more about that. But I did talk to my audiobook producer about how we were going to handle their dialogue, because they do speak in the book, and I want their voice to sound different to listeners of the audiobook. That part I am firm on. And of course, I'm going to be in consultation with my narrator over how to handle the accents of the different aliens, as I was with the fifth gender. So if you've listened to the audiobook of this book, we had to invent an accent for the aliens, right? Because they're aliens, and they speak Galactic in a kind of an accent, or Tristal does. So there's going to be a little bit of tinkering and finessing with some aspects of this audiobook which I've never done in audio before, really, but it's going to be pretty subtle. I'm someone who was raised on audiobooks and rather than television. I didn't have a television growing up. I was aware of television and I watched it at my friends, but I didn't have one in my own home. And as a result of that, I'm kind of a purist with audiobooks. I did listen to full cast audio, like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings from the BBC. They did some full cast productions back in the 80s. But my personal preference as a writer has always been having a narrator read the book. And I think that has to do with the fact that the book, even if it has multiple point of views, was written by one person. And I myself have a very strong author voice. And so for me, it just feels like a single narrator reading the book is more natural to my style of authoring. Which is not to say double narration or the way other authors handle it isn't cool too, or full cast audio or whatever. For me, maybe it was because I was raised with my mom reading books to me out loud. That just is kind of what I gravitate to if I ever listen to audiobooks, and it is what I enjoy producing, I think, for books. I'm open to other possibilities in the future, but yeah. So in other words, this is a very long way of saying it won't be enhanced particularly. It's going to be just a pretty clean narrated read of the trilogy when the audiobooks do come out. And yeah, I think you'll like them. I think I'm very pleased with the narrator. That's why I'm waiting. It's taking time because he's very much in demand. And the only modifications that I'm going to have Brian, my producer, do are with that one character. Unless he and the narrator together decide that they want something more done, which I'm always open to. I feel like when my books enter a different medium, so if they're being adapted for a graphic novel or for animation or for audio, it is a collaborative effort at that juncture with the others involved in that. And then it becomes the sort of narrator's interpretation of my words. It's not entirely mine. I'm not really precious about it. And so if the narrator has things to say or choices to make, I usually, he'll usually ask me, and then I'll usually say, well, what do you think? Like, what feels more natural to you under these circumstances? So there's often a sort of conversation that goes on around these books. But I imagine they'll be pretty clean, single point narrations. Karina, at some time I thought I had heard about a second book with the characters from the fifth gender. Oh yes. This is what happens when I have multiple characters in multiple parts of the world. Yeah, I have a very, very good idea for a second mystery. Another murder on the space station, this time around. I have an excellent idea for it. I'm very pleased with it. I have the title, but I haven't written it yet. But yes, I hope to do a second one. I haven't decided on the sort of backbone thread of the romance arc, whether it's just gonna be a cozy mystery, so we just get a check-in with Triss and Dre, and they're just puttering about doing their thing, or whether maybe it'll have a different romance for different characters, with Triss and Dre kind of there and doing the investigating, but kind of as co-leads with a different couple. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. That one's not been outlined yet, so wait for it. But yes, there's definitely an idea for that as well. I never lack for ideas, that's for sure. Doc, you're so funny. I too am a couch puff for my cat of an evening, that's for sure. She's like, oh, I'll just cast myself on top of you. Well, the characters from Cardrat Meatfex and his gang, I don't know. I hadn't planned on it. It's not in the outline, but I wrote the outline before I wrote this trilogy, so now it's possible. I might, of course it's me, so I might do a little thing where it alludes to them being on stage nearby, or on a screen, or under a dome, or something. I don't know. There might be something where, they get a shout out or a mention. I'm not sure they'll meet in person. I mean, they could. Like all things, people always ask me about the vampires in the San Andreas books, but, if I need them for plot, I will use them. That is the rule. I wouldn't write so many characters if I didn't want to make use of them. But yes, so kind of the demands of the plot and the sort of strength of the story will let me know which characters in my vast array I need to pick up and utilize in any given new book in a series, or new book in general. I'm just scrolling and looking to see if we have any other questions. You guys are so chattery. My arm got tired scrolling. Will there be a cookbook? Asks Sue. Hold on. So I started a co-blog with a cookbook author, and then it rather fizzled out, very sadly. Because wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't a cookbook be great? But yeah, she sort of just vanished off. Like, we had a proper contract and everything, which I had to pay to get drawn up, and then she just disappeared. So sadly, I am a little soured because of that experience. I would love to do a cookbook. Actually, kind of what I'd like to do is a sort of crafty book where there's like some recipes and maybe a knitting pattern and some, you know, fun and games and like ideas for an RPG or something. I don't know. Like, I'd love to do a sort of like encyclopedia world thingy book for the Parasolverse in particular. But with, you know, some pictures and some thises and that's. But yeah, that's a future project, you know, for when I kind of have like projects for when I feel like creative and writing fiction, and then projects for when I feel like being creative in an organizational spreadsheet non-fiction-y kind of way, because it's like two parts of my personality, and you know, sometimes one part is in charge. And then it kind of depends which project the muse of that side of my brain. This makes me sound so schizophrenic. I'm sorry. But so the part of my brain that does launches and, you know, the newsletter and all that sort of stuff is kind of been active at the moment, and the creative side of the muse fiction side of my brain has been sleepy lately. But she might be waking up soon. But the cookbook would utilize that side of the brain, which is being rather stretched at the moment. So no concrete plans right now. Noodles for lunch. Noodles are great. I had noodles for lunch too. I had leftover cow soy, which is one of my favorite Thai dishes from Chiang Mai. Scrolly, scrolly. I always hum when I scroll. I don't know why I do that. I'm not normally a hum person. Purple Wedding. Yes, everybody's talking about various hints and things that I have dropped about the second book of the follow-up to the Fifth Gender. You're coming up with crazy titles. Parasol Busy Book. Parasol Project Book. Parasol Distraction Book. I don't know what I would call it. I would have to figure out what was in it first, I think, before I decide what to call it. Looks like we don't have other Can we toss in coloring? Of course. Of course. There's always room for more things. Yes, it would just be a fun, silly book. Other questions? Are we just hanging out and having tea? It's getting warm in here. My face is getting red. It's because I'm hot, not because of anything else. Steampunk ADD at home. I don't have ADD, but I make no case for it. Ooh, wedding hats are wonderful. I heard about the wedding. Congratulations. One of our, I think our number is getting married. It's very exciting to everybody. I think. I'm excited. I feel like it's all my fault. Therefore, I'm pleased with myself. What else are my books but an act of bringing people together? Iced sweet tea. Yes, this would be better iced, but I don't have the means to make ice in my office. I only have one of those stupid tiny cube refrigerators, which doesn't get things cold enough. Doesn't get anything cold enough to be ice, sadly. I'm trying to think what other things. Oh, kitten. Should I give you a kitten report? So there was a great, I will talk about this in the chair up. Did I talk about this? I will talk about it more in the chair up, but there was a great kitten transfer. So my mother put out into the universe, because this is my mother, that she would like a new cat. Her beloved, my mother has a habit of raising raising cats and keeping them around for long periods of time. So we've had like 2 20-year-old cats in my life. Cats get very old with my mom in charge of them. And her much beloved elder cat, Miko, died a couple of years ago, and we were all quite saddened, of course. Miko was a lovely cat. And when Miko was first a kitten, many years ago, in like 2006 or 7, I want to say, I was still an archaeologist, and I was doing experimental pottery recreation. I was doing kiln building, and I was doing it at my mother's place, because what else do you do? Miko the kitten formed a very strong bond with my dear friend Shawnish. And Shawnish would wander around with Miko the kitten in the top of his overalls. And she would just purr up a storm and would just like hang out there. And now, many years later, Sean got a calico cat, and for his sort of homesteady farm down south, and south is in the LA area. And this calico cat, Miko was a calico, this calico cat had a kitten, and my mother was like, the universe is clearly telling me something, because Sean, who loved Miko very much and who Miko loved very much, has given into the universe a new kitten, and this kitten is meant to be mine. Meanwhile, my bestest friend in the world also wants one of the litters of kitten, so 2 kittens are now being attempted to be transported up the state. So she drove down, retrieved 2 adorable polydactyl calico kittens, and transported them back up here to the Bay Area, and then I drove over to her, picked up my mother's kitten, took my mother's kitten to a parking lot, and in a sort of like, psst, would you like a kitten? I have a pure uncut kitten here. Transferred the kitten to my mother. And then my mother took the kitten home. It's California. There's always a lot of driving involved. It's a rule in our state. But the kitten finally arrived safely home. The kitten's name is Serendipity, alias Dips. And Dips is already Dips is like, I don't know, 3 ounces. She's tiny. She's the runt of the litter. She's wee. She's between 8 and 10 weeks old. She is weaned. Don't worry about it. But she's already clearly in charge of everything at my mother's place. My mother, who's not like a super soft, cuddly animal person, is so enamored of this kitten. She keeps sending me pictures, which I do not object to. Yeah, so we have a kitten in our life. It's making everything and everybody happy. Dips is in charge. There is already a resident cat. The resident cat is a cow cat named Cody. He's a bit of a dud cat. And he is not sure about the kitten, but don't worry, knowing Cody's personality, the kitten will be in charge. And it'll all be fine. Yes, so there is this lovely little kitten. You will get some adorable pictures in the chair when it goes out beginning of next month. And yeah, she's much beloved. All right, back to, looks like I have some actual questions happening. Kitten report. Oh, hi, that's my office. That's the view out of my office window. I'm scrolling and I pressed the wrong button. All right. There were a lot of comments and there were other questions. Okay. Someday I will have a better system than my phone and Facebook Live. Jessica asks, have I visited the tea shop in person? Tea Punk Teas. No, I have not. I don't even know where they're located. Where are they located? Anyway, no, I've only met them at a couple of conventions. A couple now. Maybe 2 or 3. Yes, this is the fun thing about the steampunk world. If you start going to conventions, is it's a pretty tight community, so you will tend to see sort of familiar faces again and again. It's pretty awesome. So I have like steampunk besties now. I mean, after over a decade in the steampunk world, I should. Yeah. So I have been paying them visits in various vendor halls at various steampunk events for years. And I like their teas, and I know they had worked with my friend, Madame Askew and the Grand Arbiter, dear friends of mine from the steampunk universe, both created special teas for them. And so I knew they would be willing to do this kind of thing. So that's why, that's the reason I approached them. I know other tea vendors too who might have helped. But I also knew they already had butterfly pea leaf flowers because they already make a mint butterfly pea as part of their offerings at their tea shop. So I knew they wouldn't have to change their supply lines or anything, and because I knew they also probably had an oolong. So that was another reason I reached out to them. I thought it would be easy for them to do with the stock that they already have to hand, and I wanted to make this convenient for everybody involved. But yes, I'm almost always, when I'm traveling these days, I'm almost always traveling for like an event, like a Worldcon or a Comic-Con or a steampunk event. And it means I very rarely get to really visit the cities or the towns that I'm in. I usually just go and then go straight to the event and then go home again. So I don't get to visit that many tea shops in places, which is sad. But I get to meet the people behind the tea, which is lovely. Sally asks, Kagi is colorblind. What would someone with chromesthesia experience in the dome? I'm not going to answer that because you're going to learn a lot more in the final book. So don't worry. That was a spoiler. Sorry, everybody. Oops. I should have put a spoiler warning. Oh well. Too late now. I'll be more careful with the comments. It's not that big a spoiler. I mean, you can probably, maybe guess that. Some of you might have guessed that as you were reading the first book. Lavender says, if it wasn't asked yet. The only time I've ever seen the word imago used was in Octavia Butler's work. Oh, no, I wasn't aware of that, actually. The word imago is from the study of bugs and insects, and it's a very common word in that field. So that's where I borrowed it from. The concept of nymph and life stage, so larval, nymph, imago, those are life stages of various different kinds of bugs. And yeah, that's where I got the word from. I was unaware that Octavia Butler used it. I've read some of her work, but clearly not that one. Or I forgot that she also used the word. So yes, no intentional connection on my part. Although we might, as often happens with authors, be using similar source research and source material. There we go. Sue says that T-Punk Teas is in Texas! Exclamation point. So there it is. Well, and somebody else says that they'll be in the area for work and you should go visit it. And everybody says that they love them, which is true. That is the other thing about working with somebody you have met via the convention circuit or whatever, is I know they're nice people. So that's also a good reason to work with the tea vendor that I chose. Yes. So this is the other thing. I mean, I'm all over the place in this live. I'm sorry, everybody. But, you know, you get what you pay for. 3:44. I was just checking the time. The other thing with this series, the Tinker Starsong series, is because I wrote them all at once, and it's 3 books, and they're all coming out back to back. I'm a little discombobulated about what happens in each book because, to be fair, I forgot. But also, to be fair, trying to hold all 3 books in my head at the same time and keep them distinct from each other is pretty difficult. When I'm, kind of editing one and releasing another one and, that kind of a thing. I had sort of notes about what happened in each book for myself, but of course I've lost the notes. So yes, so sometimes I'll give a spoiler because I forgot which book it was in. But that is also to say it's very hard to talk about this series at all without doing some kind of spoiling, because it is still a very me series, which means it's very layered in how the information is kind of doled out, and you get little surprises and little character reveals and species reveals and stuff like that as you go along to sort of satisfy your curiosity, but also, as an instrument of pacing and storytelling. I think when you're writing science fiction and fantasy, some of what you're writing is a mystery, because some of what people are reading you for is how the worlds work, how the aliens work, how the magical system works. That when we love a genre in terms of like sci-fi fantasy in particular, some of the things we love about it is getting immersed in this other world and then learning about it through the course of the story. And I think readers of genre, like science fiction and fantasy, are more kind of open to that sensation. And they're more, me, as readers, we're just more open to the mystery of it for a while, because we know that the author will eventually explain it or reveal what's actually going on. So the Dicey and their kind of motives and who they are and why they're doing what they're doing, why they've created this entertainment system, what it does to humans or to sapiens, why they're, proselytizing, why they're pushing it so much. That's like kind of the big mystery of these books that I'm hoping you're curious to find out more. And so each one of these books reveals a little bit more about them and about what they're doing. And that is also an instrument of making Fex question himself and why he's doing it. Because he was kind of pulled into this accidentally, right? He happens to be good at a thing, and then he got recruited to become a god, and he was like, well, I'm good at this. I'm better at it than anything else. I might as well do it. And then, of course, he finds his place and his friends and his family there and his lover, and he sort of gets stuck in it. But then he has to think seriously about what it is that it's doing to people when he participates in this thing. And that's kind of a coming of age narrative. I think this is often something we go through as we transition from teenager to adult. A realization of the impact that our actions have on our friends and loved ones, but also on the greater whole of humanity. And so he's going through that kind of cycle of revelation. And that's part and parcel with understanding what the Dicey are doing and what the divinity does and how it impacts the reality of the world and the reality of the galaxy. So, that was very cerebral, but that's, so me unwrapping mysteries and dropping spoilers accidentally is also kind of tied into the fact that the whole point of these books is this discovery about what's going on. Going back and reading while I was waxing poetical, which you all were saying. Samantha asks, did I write all three separately? No, I wrote all three books pretty much back to back, which is very unusual for me. Now, I didn't write them all as one big book. So Tamara Pierce, who I'm a huge fan of, talks about writing the Song of the Lioness as one massive book. That's not how I wrote these. I tend to write naturally, pacing-wise and beats-wise in terms of, beginning, middle, and end, from 80 to 90,000 words. That's just how I seat as a writer. And these ones came in at about that age. This one's a little bit longer than normal, but this one's about, it's like 85 or something. I tend to go with 85, 95. I think this one's about 90, 95. And so I wrote them back to back, but I did write each one as a complete story. So I wrote this one, and then this one came immediately after that, and then Dome 6, the third one, came immediately after that. So it was a lot of writing. It was like a year and a half of writing for these, for me. But because they came back to back like that, I could go back to book one and put foreshadowing in and tinker around with things and remove a bit that was too soon of a reveal and stick it into this book, and that kind of thing, which from a writer perspective is a lot of fun. And I have never been able to do that in my career, because previously when I was writing like the Parasol Protectorate series or the Finishing School series or even the San Andreas Shifter series, I was publishing them as I wrote them, or my traditional publisher was publishing as I wrote them right afterwards. And so the book would be out and on the shelves while I was writing the next one. So I couldn't change anything in those earlier books, whereas that's not the case with these. So I feel like this trilogy is probably my tightest, cleanest, most linked trilogy, even though they are separate books. Which is to say that if you finish the trilogy and then go back and start reading it again, I always write things to be reread. That's one of my author DNAs. If you go back and start, you're going to catch a lot of things. So I'm one of those writers where I feel like every time you reread my books, you should catch something a little different. And every time I write a new book in a series or a new book in that universe, it has little reverberating impacts and understandings on all of the previous books in the series, or it should. So you get a little sense of a different revelation about the universe or what have you as each book comes along. And these ones do that more than I ever have been able to before, simply because I wrote them the way I wrote them. And, you know, it was unusual for me. I don't know if that will ever happen again, where I'll be inspired to write 3 books back to back like that. I mean, we were living in very interesting times when I wrote those books. But I mean, anything's possible. I did it once. I can always do it again. But yeah, I think these are particularly special to me, partly because of that, because of the way they were written and the way I could edit them and the way they could inform each other. So no, it was not written as one big story. It was written as 3 concrete separate stories. And that's not because I didn't want to write it as one big story. It's because I naturally write in novel length now. It would be very difficult for me to write anything substantially shorter than 40,000 words and substantially longer than 120. I think like my brain DNA for narrative structure is kind of novella to novel length now, which is one of the many reasons I don't write epic, because it's just longer than I think my natural rhythm as an author is. I tend to be relatively short writing as writers go, as novelists go. I write differently from a lot of authors in that I write what I call bare bones, which I tend to underwrite my first draft, so it tends to be short. And then what I'm doing on the second pass is putting stuff into it and adding things in and putting in descriptions and moments of humor and a little extra character here or whatever. I know a lot of authors overwrite the first, so they write too long in their first draft and then they edit down in their second one. I'm the opposite most of the time. I did. Quite a few people have already identified with the Imago character, the Imago attitude, and that's definitely a little bit of you're responding to me and my affection, I think, also, because I love them. I love their attitude. I think this is something that is very appealing about Lord Akaldama as well, and I call this the capricious god character. So, I always loved the idea that a true immortal, like a true god, for me, is going to behave a little bit in the way that like the ancient Greek gods did with humans, where you both need them because, you know, in the case of vampires, they're your food source, or in the case of Dicey, it's your entertainment source or your profit margin. But there's something about that attitude, that way of looking at youngsters or mortality, with a sort of like jaded but somewhat affectionate eye. So yeah, I mean, I think you get that from Lord Akaldama, and it's definitely like, you know, Hermes, the sort of trickster god idea, the capricious god. And of course, I use that exact vocabulary when I'm talking about Misset, who's very, very intentionally and very much a kind of Hermes or sort of Mercury kind of character. But yeah, the Imago's attitude is great. It's very fun to write. It's very fun to set up this incredibly complicated, elaborate system, and then have a character who sort of wafts in and is like, "Oh, aren't you cute?" It's almost like the character wafted in and said that to me as the creator of the Dicey and the Divinity. You know, the Imago's just like, nice, well done, Gail. Like, good little author. Aren't you clever? Lavender asks, now that I've built the Tinkered Stars universe, besides the laid aside book, oh, sorry, I'm reading. I'm trying to get it to show me the rest of the comment. Will we get to see more of this universe after Dome 6? Yes, because the second Cardbat book is also in this universe, and that's kind of at the same time as Demigod 12 and Dome 6. And then the maybe a little before and at the same time. I mean, time is relative when you're talking about a galaxy. And then the fifth gender will get more, and you know, now that I've written the dome tech in, perhaps we'll introduce a cupola to the space station that Dre and Triss have to deal with. I don't know. It might just be a little aside. It might just be a little like nudge nudge wink wink in the next book in the fifth gender series. So certainly. And then there's a whole other series set in this universe, which of course is in my brain, but, and the first book actually has been written, but that's the one that is really, really dark. So, I don't quite know what to do with it, because it's not really me. I don't think you guys would like it. So, I'm really nervous about bringing it out, and I think it needs a really strong edit pass anyway. So yeah, there's lots more to have happen. But wait until you've read Dome 6 to ask about what might happen next, because, yeah, it's the third book in the series for a reason. And you know me, like, I love closing out a series. It's like my favorite thing. I tend to think my final books in series are my strongest books. That is something that I really believe I'm good at as an author, ending stuff. So I think Timeless is the strongest of the Parasol Protectorate books. I think Manners and Mutiny is the strongest of the Finishing School, and I think Reticence is the strongest of the Custard Protocol books. I don't know, there's just something about having written all of the characters, all I have to do is like kind of tie up the threads and stuff. It just really appeals to me and my style of like tidy writing. I don't know, comforting and tidy writing. The ends are really satisfying for me, and I think that translates to the page. So Sally asked if there will be a hardcover release. So I have thought about this. I could reach out to Subterranean, and I might, to see if they wanted to do an omnibus of all three of these books. But it would be a massive book, because these are full length. So, I mean, can you imagine that would make it a book, you know, that fat, right? Like, it would be a big book. And they don't really specialize in really big books like that. I think they said that Delightfully Deadly. So this is 3 books, but it's novella length, right? So they're shorter. Well, one of them's novel length, but pretty much it's just shorter. I think they said that this was the fattest book they'd ever done. So I don't know if they'd be willing to go fatter for a hardcover. But that is how I like to do my hardcovers. I like to work with a small press. Ingram has a hardcover option and Amazon has a hardcover option. I think it's case wrapped hardcover. I'm just not wild about their quality, and I feel like if I'm gonna do a hardcover, I want it to be something really special and really high end. So that's why I like working with Subterranean so much, because they do just such beautiful, beautiful books. So yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, and I haven't even reached out to them, but you know, or maybe we could do a two-parter, or maybe they would be even interested in doing all 3 as hardcover. I don't know. I would like to. I love hardcover. I mean, what I want is to do like a true, using their like cloth style and inlay, a true like 1930s style book for these, like the early pulp sci-fis. Have these beautiful deco covers from that time period, which these are alluding to, the sort of propaganda, World War II propaganda posters, or World War I and propaganda posters that sort of trickled in to the style. Anyway, I'd love to, but let me get these 3 out first. Give me time to catch my breath. Samantha saying something about Misset's parents as musical sociologists. Yes. Yeah, my academia leaks in all the time. Yeah, Misset's parents are very interesting characters. I will tell you that much. Yeah. Sue asks, if I have more fun creating new worlds than using real places. What an interesting question. I mean, ooh, God. Wow, that's a rough one, Sue. I don't know. They're both fun. I mean, I am a historian and an archaeologist, I love ancient cultures, in particular, ancient ones, old ones, especially ones where I know something about them and others do not, like the Wari, for example, or you know, Americans and British English readers don't really study some of the cultures that I have been fortunate enough to actually to study as an expert, so one small bit of it. You know, so I do love that. I mean, I do love taking characters in the Parasol Protectorate to visit like places and times that, you know, we maybe don't know nothing about, like Singapore in the 1870s. That was, or 1890s. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing the research. I love research. So, and even when I'm creating something whole cloth new I'm always doing research. like the post that's coming up, I mean, I already did the 10 best bits of research for the first book, and I've done the 10 best bits of research for the second book. But eventually I'll do a collative post, which is basically like the appendices for these books, which has everything I looked up for these, and there's a lot. I did a lot of research for these books, even though I'm fully creating, you know, the aliens and the planets and things out of my imagination. So both is the answer. I like to do both. I think I gravitate to one or the other, which is, you know, I tend to reach for science fiction in particular if I'm grappling with something very conceptual, like in this particular instance, the nature of parasocial relationships, for example. I tend to go for sci-fi and building things, almost like I'm having a philosophical discourse with experimental modeling in my own brain in order to tackle these problems. Feel like I can noodle on them better when it's not my culture, or whether it's or if it's alien cultures that I've invented, which I think is why I so often write sci-fi with fish out of water characters. So I'm only realizing this about myself right now, right? So Fex is a fish out of water character. He is removed into a world that is alien to him. He's already in a world that's alien to him. He's a refugee, but he's then lifted out of that world and transported to another one that's even more alien to him. And this allows me to write him as a point of view character, as a kind of anthropologist. Like, he's sort of trying to integrate, but he's also trying to understand as an outsider how the dicey work, how the divinity works, that sort of thing. And that allows me to grapple with the concepts in play in a kind of philosophical way. And I did that with Triss, who's another outsider character. I mean, he's integrating slowly into human society, and he's been there for a while, but the way he views the world is as an alien. We're the aliens. Humans are the aliens for Triss. And that's a rich source of humor, of course, when you write in that particular direction. But it's also another fish out of water technique. And then I did it again with Mora. So, I mean, she's very much enmeshed in her own culture, but halfway through Krugrat, she leaves and goes to the Kilki Coalition. So she, again, becomes a fish out of water, where she has to adapt to this new world. I guess I just really like that. Because it gives my main character a kind of perspective and a kind of way of talking about and thinking about the world that is this sort of allied to the reader's perspective in some way. Like, it's new to you. The divinity and how it works is new to you. It's also new to Fex. I mean, he knows the music. He's been under the dome. He's experienced it, but not as a creator of it. So you, the reader, and he, the performer, are going on this experience together. And learning about how things work together. And that's for me, why one of the ways I access sci-fi, and one of the reasons I love writing it so much. For the other stuff, for writing stuff that's set in the modern day or in the past, it's more a dialogue I'm having with myself about historical perspective and about how we look at our own past or our own present. I will also often write kind of marginalized and disenfranchised characters. I'm thinking about Isaac in the Omega Objection, for example. So he was in a cult for a really long time, and then he's like ejected into the real world and has to interface with it. Or characters that feel very isolated and alone, like Colin in Enforcer Enigma, or even Judd to a certain extent. So I do like that, clearly like that character archetype quite a bit, but it's when it's set in something that's familiar to me or something for which I've done a ton of research in order to make it familiar to me, it's more about establishing a new perspective on that condition or that place and time from the character's point of view than it is about this kind of whole scale discovery. It's more of a rediscovery, I guess. So it kind of depends what kind of world building I want to do. Really depends on which kind of exploration I want to do as a creative, I guess. Whether I want to re-examine the past, or have a dialogue with the present, or whole cloth create the future. Well, I mean, that's the joy of being a writer, isn't it? As we get the options, especially in genre fiction. Sally wants to know, given their particular suspicions about the Dome and the Dicey agenda and the Imago attitude is kind of sinister. It is meant to be sinister, yes. It is, but that's the thing, right? We're going back to previous conversations. Sorry to people who've just recently tuned in, but that's the thing with the Imagos is, and with the vampires, is they are meant to be kind of sinister. Because immortals, or people who are at different life stages, or don't care about the same things we do about how we live, they are sinister. Gods are sinister because they are dangerous, because they don't share the same value system. They don't share the same moral system. They don't have the same perspective on the world and what they want out of that world. And therefore, they are both very powerful and innately, entirely untrustworthy. Because you know they have their own agenda. That's the trickster god. Like, that's what makes them exciting from a writer perspective. And I think from a reader, and appealing, I think, from a reader, is that very cavalier attitude, the attitude of the psychopath in some narratives, the attitude, I'm thinking about, the attitude of the warlord, or the super wealthy, or the super powerful in terms of physical prowess or swordsmanship or whatever, the Achilles perspective, right? Like, these archetypes of characters don't care about the same things that we care about. They don't care about the characters you're reading about in the same way that you, the reader, and me, the writer, care about these characters. And so they are sinister, yeah. I mean, we all love Lord Akldama, but he will probably slit your throat if he feels like it. Like, if you're dressed in the wrong color, like, he is still dangerous. He is still sinister, but that's part of why we like him, right? It's that, I don't know, I think it's human nature to be a little attracted to the dark, a little, like, excited by the risk, especially in what we're reading, because what we read is low risk. It's not us. It's just the characters we love who are really at risk. And then we love these characters. We love the morally gray, ambiguous characters. We love the assassin characters. We love the rogue characters. Because they have the courage to do the things that we would never do, because they can do that risk, because they don't have the same moral foundation. But also they're a little unpredictable. And that makes them very exciting. And yeah, I mean, it's like pushing your heat tolerance and eating the really spicy thing. That's what these characters are for me, anyway. They're the spice. There's a spice in my books. So yes, you're absolutely meant to, I mean, this is what when I write a super sinister character like the Imago character, I tend to write them very appealing. And it's very interesting to me when my readers like either really gravitate towards them or are deeply suspicious of them, because frankly, you're meant to be both with these characters. How cavalier is the Imago, or are the Imagos? Wait and see. You'll find out. Yeah, Charity, your GL suggestion is where my brain was going with the next fifth gender book. Yes, you are correct. It would be massive and beautiful, talking about a hardcover omnibus. Charity says that if I were a crocheter or a knitter, I would be the one who never forgets to weave in the end. You are absolutely correct. I love tightening and finishing things when I'm crafting, when I'm sewing, whatever it is I'm doing. There's something about the finality of a thing. I know there are many crafters who like will start a project and then just have an endless project going. I am not one of those people. It's really stressful for me to have ongoing projects. I'm more of a person who likes to like set aside an entire afternoon and then finish a thing. So yes, yeah, you're correct. Hitchhiker's Guide. I have the Hitchhiker's Guide. I had the Hitchhiker's Guide omnibus as well. Somebody's mentioning having it. Scrolling through. Katie has a question. Oh, that's a good question because I know readers will do this too. Katie's asks, do I find myself saving books for when I'll need it? As a writer, to write? Maybe yes. Sometimes. That's really, because I know readers will do that. Like, you know, your favorite author will drop a book and you maybe won't read it right away because you're like, I don't need it right now. I'm in a good mood. I'm having a good time. It's summer break. You know, like, I'm going to wait and maybe read that in a couple of weeks when I need it more, when I'm emotionally needy of it. For me, it's a little bit less like that. I think as a writer, I just write what I'm moved to write at the time that I'm writing it. I don't think I save stories for later when I'm going to work on them or anything. I do feel like there are some book ideas and book projects like the W&A series, which is this other one in the Tinker Stars universe, that I published a sample of it for everybody to try a while ago. And it's just sort of sitting on the back burner because it needs to have a real dark, monstrous main character, and I'm not sure I can write that. And maybe I'm saving that one because I think I will be ready in the future. I think there may come a time where when I'm prepared to dwell in a dark character's head like that, and I think I'm a little too fragile right now to do that. I mean, part of the reason I write the comforting book hug books that I write is because that's what I like to read and what I gravitate towards, and so I tend not to write dark and angsty unless I'm grappling with something. And you know, I have to work it out on the page. When I tend to go kind of nostalgic and wistful when I'm doing that, you know, I'm thinking about Ambush Mordor. So yeah, I think I've been a bit more of a mood writer than anything. I think I need to be in the right mood to write. So it's not necessarily when I need to write that book so much as when I feel like I can write it. And not like physically can, but like emotionally can, or in some cases skill set can. Like a couple of projects I put on the back burner that I'm like, I'm 30 odd books in, I'm over 10 years a full-time author. I don't know that I'm good enough for that one yet. It's there and I'm gonna write it eventually, but maybe I have more things to learn first, because you know, that's the greatest thing about being a writer is I'm constantly learning and changing and educating myself in how to better write. At least I hope I am. Never want to stop learning. Sally asks if there are any sci-fi books with musical elements you'd recommend. Well, I do know Catherine Valente has a Eurovision in space, which is called Space Opera, I think. But I have not read it. And of course, there was the Crystal Singer series from, is that an Anne McCaffrey or a Mercedes Lackey? I read that as a child, so I cannot be accused of misremembering because it's been a long time since I read those books. But there's the Crystal Singer series. Those are two that's a Planetfall series. So those are two that I can think of off the top of my head that involve music and science fiction. I feel like I am missing a few off the board. If we were playing Jeopardy, I would not be winning this category. There are definitely a few other much older ones that I just don't remember off the top of my head. But I'm sure the comments will tell us, or you know, we can throw this open to the Parasol Protectorate group, and they'll come up with some other ones. But yeah, I didn't do prep work in terms of reading other people's sci-fi before I started writing these books. I don't feel like I need to do that. I never do. I'm always really scared that if I read authors who are writing in exactly the same or too similar of a genre when I'm writing in it or about to write in it, that it's going to inform my voice and color my work too much, and I don't want that at all. So I tend to be I'll be researching for the books I am writing, lots, nonfiction research all the time, but I tend to be reading something completely different. So, you know, if I'm writing the San Andreas Shifter books, I might be reading military sci-fi or something completely different. so as not to cross-pollinate in any way. Ooh, sorry. I don't know, Lynn, I don't know what everyone does, but I'm sure it's an interesting conversation. Katie asked whether I would be. Katie asked whether I would consider this new series to be comforting or upsetting. Fall semester will be rough. I need comfy. It's very comforting. I think it's incredibly comforting. I think the ending is great. I love this series so much. Yeah, of course it's me. It's going to be, I mean, I know, like, Ambassador was a bit much for some people, although you never know it from the reviews. But yeah, this is very much me. It is the ultimate massive hug found family narrative. Don't worry. There are some little dark elements. You have to go on a ride. This is still narrative. Like, I'm still telling you a story. So there's gonna be a journey you go on in the last book. But I think it has a glorious ending. I mean, you're gonna have to tell me when you read it. Yeah, I mean, who am I to judge or make claims? Katie, maybe you should let somebody whose opinion you trust, who's a fellow reader, read the book first, and then you can ask them for particulars. That's often what I will do with both movies and books. I have kind of curators who I go to where I'm like, is this gonna be worth it? Is this gonna hurt me? You know, does this really have a happy ending? Is everything gonna be all right? Yeah, and I have stopped watching or never finished or never started series when one of my trusted sources has said, nope, that one's gonna hurt you too much. I personally do not think this series will hurt you. I think it's gonna be all okay in the end. But if you're very, very sensitive, then you're better off finding someone who's a reader whose opinion you trust to read it first. It is space opera. Ah, I was right. Look at me go. Ooh, yes, there are some good recommendations in the comments. Stardance, yeah. Right. It's funny, there are a couple of you at steampunk events tuning into this live, which is very cute. Samantha asks, I'm gonna read the comment first because I want to make sure it's not. Samantha asks, are some members of asterism, or Fex in particular, being intentionally written as neurodivergent? No. I am aware that many of my characters sometimes read as neurodivergent, but it isn't intentional. If I were being intentional with it, I would have done a lot more research because I would want to get it right. No. Fex is being written for the thing that I did do a lot of research to, which is refugee conditioning or lack of conditioning, and sudden and somewhat unwitting immersion in a culture not your own. So that sort of sense of alienation that you get when you have been forced to flee for a new place, a new language, and a new culture. And so I'm writing him with that, and some of his sort of stuttering and interactions and awkwardness are that. Now, the friends of mine I've interviewed who are essentially refugees, and the research that I did doesn't explicitly have this personality type. You know, that it isn't one-to-one correlative. I don't write exact reality into my books. But like kind of the way he reacts and how cautious he is and all that sort of stuff is kind of my like personal research into kind of refugees, but also into, you know, some like family history that from my own family and from others I know whose families were first forced to flee their homelands. So, you know, that's kind of what's going on with Fex in particular. Yeah, I am personally like, you can bring whatever you want to my books. I write these books for you. They are meant to be read by readers. So if you identify something in Fex that you find extremely sympathetic, then that's wonderful. Like, please read into him whatever you need him to be. You know, like he's your character too. But I didn't intentionally do that, or I would have done more research. Same thing with Percy and a couple of other characters. But I will also add that because I grew up in fandom, in particular in like the early, the 80s and 90s, which was often a place of refuge for geeks and those who are what we would now call neurodivergent, but we didn't have the language for it, 30, 40 years ago. I also have a lot of friends who I think now would identify as neurodivergent, or if they cared and wanted to get diagnosed, we're Gen X, we don't give a shit, really. Excuse my French. I don't really care about definitions as Xers, but I think a lot of them are spectrum in some regard, and those are the people I love and the people I'm surrounded by. So, of course, when I'm writing my characters, that kind of personality leaks into a lot of my books. But it isn't explicitly intentional. It's just by accident of proximity, I guess. I love geeks. I've always been in and out of the geek world, and the geekdom has always been a place where people who don't fit in fled, especially when I was young. Who people who the world says don't fit in, I suppose, is the way I would put it. And so a lot of my characters are geeky in some respect, and some of that geekiness manifests and or could be qualified as neurodivergence in some regard. But please love them and take them and make them what you want them to be and what is best and healthiest for you, in order to see yourself in these books, right? Like, isn't that what we want when we read, to a certain extent? Frickin' Isaac, says Charity. Sometimes the comments are so funny because I'm like coming to them 15 minutes late. Oh, Lavender, that's interesting. I didn't think of it from that perspective. The Tinkers are an interesting... I mean, the Tinkers are kind of the ultimate capricious gods. Like, they developed the technology to transform humans to match the environment, and then they just started to play with it. I mean, there's a kind of throwaway line in one of the books, I can't remember which one, where I talk about the Galloi, who are Triss's people in the fifth gender, being the platypus of the galaxy. And it's a little nosy, it's a little sharp, I guess, because that's probably what the Tinkers were doing, and there's a good chance that's what they were doing with the Dicey as well, which is moving beyond their mandate of making it so that humanity could survive on alien worlds and just playing with the human DNA and playing with ideas of bugness within humanity and life stages and how that would manifest. And there's something a little gross and corrupt in that, which is what they became. That's the kind of heritage of the Tinkers, is that they went out into the stars and in order to change humanity to survive, they entirely lost their own humanity. And it turns out that the technology went bad too, and that's the quarantine zone, right? We alluded to it a little bit, but there's also this other thing going on in this galaxy, which is the Tinkers lost control. They lost control of themselves and their own experimenting, and they lost control of their technology. Right? Because too much hubris, right? The fall of man, they thought they were gods in the end. And yeah. So that's kind of alluded to as going on in the background with these books. And definitely it would have impacted brain function, all function. That's what happens when you think you can change humans to be gods or to be aliens. All right, I think we're running into the hour. I'm gonna scroll through. Oh God, we went way over. Why didn't anybody say anything? I'm gonna scroll through and make sure I didn't miss any important questions. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. You didn't have to stay. We've run a little longer than I thought. I got very philosophical on this live. I'm feeling it. It's the heat. The heat makes me thoughtful, I guess. My goodness, there's a lot of great commentary on books recommended that have music and space. And it looks like no other important questions. Good. Well, this has been a lovely discussion. Thanks for such interesting and thoughtful questions. And I hope you all have gorgeous and delightful weekends. Do something good for yourself, treat yourself, have some noodles, some cheese, I don't know, whatever, have some purple tea, something to spoil yourself. Good luck heading back to school or heading back to work or whatever it is that you're looking forward to, and we'll be talking next month when you all hopefully will have had a chance to finish this book and maybe have more questions for me or questions about anything else. And of course, the third book will be on the horizon when we talk next. So, yes, take care of yourselves, take care of somebody else if you can, and I'll talk to you in a month.